So we're moving forward to our last session of day 2 on the Global Congress. Transnational organized crime in relation to counterfeiting and piracy. This session will focus on a more inclusive approach to addressing the transnational organized crime aspects of trafficking in illicit goods, such as counterfeit products. Involvement of transnational organized criminals in the production and distribution of counterfeit products, linkages between counterfeiting and piracy and other types of illicit criminal activities, new law enforcement approaches, interagency cooperation at national and international level. Now I'd like to invite the moderator, Mr. Roberto Manriquez, Acting Assistant Director, Trafficking in Illicit Goods Subdirectorate Interpol, and hand over the floor to him to moderate the panel and invite the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again, and I would like to express our gratitude on behalf of all of us here to the Turkish authorities for the magnificent organization of this wonderful conference. So far, it has been outstanding, the results, and we are very pleased to connect with different partners here in this Congress. So I will invite immediately the panelists that will help us to have what we hope it will be a very fruitful panel, and these friends are Mr. Shang Peng, who will give a speech on behalf of Mr. Chao Feng Deng from the Economic Crime Investigation Department, Ministry of Public Security of People's Republic of China. Please. Thank you very much. Ms. Rosella Magnon, she is a legal officer from the Office of Legal Affairs of Interpol. She's a colleague of mine. Welcome, Rosella. As well as Mr. Marco Musumeci. He is Counterfeiting Program Officer for UNICRI. Also, we welcome Mr. Vasil Nevolia from the National Central Bureau of Interpol in Ukraine, who is also the head of the NCV in Ukraine. Welcome. Mr. Juan Pablo Sousa Perez, who is a lieutenant from the International Investigations Division from the National Central Bureau in Colombia. And finally, Mr. Mikhailo Tijanik, Chief of Department for IPR, Ministry of Interior in Serbia. The shape of our panel will be, we will allocate 10 minutes to each one of our panelists to express their ideas and to tell us what they want to share with us today. And finally, we will have the possibility to open the floor for questions, or even our same panelists maybe can exchange some ideas that can be very useful for you. I would like to tell you very briefly about the work that we've been doing in Interpol. We are the Trafficking in Illicit Goods and Counterfeiting Program. We've been working in different similar issues for around 10 years in Interpol, but now we are more focused on trafficking in illicit goods and counterfeiting, as our title mentions. We are structured in 5 pillars, one of them which is very important, and this is part of that main activity, which is raising awareness, which is a crucial component of our program. We are targeting law enforcement authorities, governments, business people, consumers, which is also very important to reach in this struggle we have. Building police capacity. We try to equip law enforcement agencies, police, customs, and all related bodies to have tools and contacts to perform a better work in their field of expertise. We organize also regional trainings, conferences, operational workshops. We have online training. You also can attend to our booth we have in the main lobby, and you will see that we are ready to provide you support with this online training. So far, we have provided training not only through internet, but also with the presential activities to over 5,000 law enforcement around the world. Last year, in terms of operation, which is another very important issue for us to support the deployment of operations in the different regions of the world, we had 8 operations and we reached 50 countries with those deployments, and one of those, it was Turkey. We really need to express our gratitude also to Turkish authorities because they were very committed in organizing trainings, and also they took part in a very important operation that you maybe heard during these days, which is Black Poseidon. Finally, the two other pillars that we are committed to support the community with are the technical legal assistance to member countries. Ms. Rosella Mangione will refer to that in a few minutes. And finally, what our Secretary General yesterday informed, which is the I-Check-It. It's a product verification tool. In general, those are the elements that we make available to all the international community for you to be aware that we as Interpol, we are here to support all the law enforcement work. And we are very pleased to start now with our panelists. So I invite, please, Mr. Shang Peng, who will make the speech on behalf of Mr. Xiao Feng, then from the Economic Crime Investigations Department, Ministry of China. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to discuss the enforcement strategy and planning of combating transnational organized crime in counterfeiting and piracy. I focus on the following two issues. The first issue is the current characteristics of transnational organized crime in the production and sale of counterfeit goods. I'd like to give an example. May 2012, China and the United States enforcement jointly carried out an action codenamed Blue Plan. It resulted in the successful abolishment of a large multinational selling counterfeit bags criminal organization. The Chinese police detained 33 suspects and shut down 37 suppliers for the making and selling of counterfeit goods. The United States police seized thousands of counterfeit bags with value in excess of $40 million, whilst arresting the organization kingpin. According to the investigation, since 2010, the criminal organization produced a large number of counterfeit LV, Burberry branded goods in China, and the goods were smuggled into the United States, the Middle East, and the other countries for retail sale. This is a typical case and has the following features. One, there is a manufacturing and supply chain. Some illegal enterprises provide raw materials, and some produce fake bags, and some logistics companies transfer the goods, and all of them get profit from the crime industry chain. Two is the occupation of criminals in order to make the counterfeit goods as a means of a livelihood, which is then used as a way of normally sustaining large-scale production. Three is the globalization of their actions. We have found that criminals from many developing countries are responsible for production and reproduction processes, and some countries' criminals are responsible for the design and the customization of counterfeit products and their international distribution. And the second issue is the precision and enforcement strategy of the Chinese police on combating transnational organized crime in the areas counterfeiting and piracy. In recent years, Chinese police, from the point of view of national innovation and development, have been heavily involved in the protection of public health and safety goals, and always implementing strategies and initiatives so as to adhere to the reduction and removal of all related transnational organized crime syndicates. Firstly, with the growing number of cases of transnational cross-border crimes, the Chinese police have focused in the fight and partnered with international law enforcement agencies to gain cooperation in the field of IPR crimes, including mutual assistance to investigate, deal with investigations and evidence collection, uncovering important clues, assisting in financial recourse, the rapid exchange of information, and providing the necessary judicial assistance. Recent years, the Chinese police with Interpol, the United States, Burma, Canada, and the other countries' enforcement agencies have jointly implemented Spring, Overseas, Storm, and a series of other international enforcement actions. Secondly, the Chinese police have discovered that advanced implementation of clustering better tactics in view of the kind of crime. The purpose of these tactics is to destroy the whole chain of counterfeiting and piracy. The Ministry of Public Security of China, in charge of general action, and the branch police must pay great attention in order to source clues while digging further into this investigation and establishing greater regional cooperation and collaboration. At last, all police organs will be united in their actions. Using this strategy, the Chinese police have uncovered a number of major multinational suppliers involved in the production and sale of counterfeit goods. At present, the Chinese police have launched a nationwide special anti-counterfeiting campaign that has the goal of cracking down on all kinds of counterfeit and piracy crimes. We welcome legitimate enterprises to register, report, or complain in relation to their counterfeit cases or new ones. We also are looking forward to cooperating with law enforcement agencies from all around the world to support, participate in, and jointly fight against all kinds of illegal and criminal activities. In closing, we welcome healthy dialogues with you and further these goals and are open to discussions on how we can work to remove this economic barrier for all. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang Peng. And now, please, we invite Rosella Manjon.
Good afternoon. So, what concerns Interpol today, and what concerns all of us, is the growth of transnational organised crime and illicit trade within which intellectual property crime features. Let me highlight some of the key elements of transnational organised crime that will form the basis of my discussion. Transnational organised crime is formed by two elements. The first, organised criminal groups which participate in the activity, and the second, that the offences committed are transnational in nature. When we talk about organised criminal groups, essentially, we talk about a structured group of three or more persons, that the group exists for a period of time and acts in concert. The group acts with the aim of committing one or more serious crimes or offences, and they act in order to obtain, directly or indirectly, a financial or other material benefit. Then when we talk about the offence and whether it's transnational in nature, we look to, is the offence committed in more than one state? Or perhaps it is committed in one state, but a substantial part of its preparation, planning, direction, or control takes place in another state. Or perhaps, again, it is committed in one state, but it involves an organised criminal group that engages in criminal activities in more than one state, or it's committed in one state but has substantial effects in another state. I also want to note that criminal groups involved in illicit trade tend to diversify. Where historically they were specialised in one sort of crime, now they've evolved into multi-branch companies, and they're active in all, for example, in drugs, pharmaceuticals, tobacco products, precious stones, or arms trafficking. They're able to do this as the methods and processes that are involved in the illicit trade are essentially the same, even though the goods may change. So, for example, diversion, the use of free trade zones, the use of falsified or forged documents, bribery, corruption, money laundering. Another thing to note is the transnational nature of the phenomenon due to increasing international trade and the development in technology and modern methods that we have of distribution, like internet sales. And of course, the transnational aspect has evident legal implications, given the multiplicity of jurisdictions involved, countries of origin, for example, or transit or destination, and also given the increased necessity for international cooperation. And of course, our goals are simple, right? 1, arrest and prosecute these criminals, and 2, deprive them of the associated financial gain. I would just like to examine quickly the pre-existing international framework available to us and its utility, though I will conclude that we have some way to go in improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the system. But in the meantime, the practical and operational processes, both legal and through law enforcement, those are the things that will see us succeed. In the current international legal framework, being the set of treaties that are in force and in place, of course it has certain benefits. Firstly, internationally it provides a common understanding of concepts. Secondly, it creates international minimum standards where it can. 3, we have the required harmonisation of national legislation. And 4, we have effective channels for international cooperation. But I must note that there's no single international treaty that addresses illicit trade in a comprehensive manner. What we can identify are 3 types of treaties. Those that address illicit trade in specific areas, so for example, treaties on drug trafficking or pharmaceuticals, on the counterfeiting of medical products, cultural property treaties, the treaties in the sector of arms or nuclear material transport, environmental crime, the illicit trade in tobacco products, and we have a number of different areas like this. We also have cross-sectoral criminal law treaties, and these treaties are very important. So the first is the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime, the UNTOC, and 3 related protocols. The second is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and the third, the International Convention for the Suppression and Financing of Terrorism, and finally a Council of Europe Convention on laundering, search, seizure, confiscation of proceeds of crime and the financing of terrorism. That's a long one. And the third type of treaty we see are the trade-related treaties, so the TRIPS. When the system, as it is now, while it appears to be comprehensive, it's certainly not enough. The international community always has to adapt. But the time that it takes for us to adapt to new emerging threats is much longer than the time it takes for criminal Interpol, OLAF, etc., are indispensable, as they have the capacity to be operational and reactive. Currently, the international community is too slow to adapt to new threats. And if we think about the time that it takes to negotiate a new convention, for example, then we have to have it adopted, signed, ratified, put into force, and in certain instances this is before it's even incorporated into national legislation. My second point is, while the system is here, it's definitely not used to its full potential. For example, no country uses the UNTOC for mutual legal assistance or extradition. They prefer the use of bilateral treaties or the use of police cooperation, which can be effective in many cases. So states tend to use conventions more at a regional level. The best consequence of the international framework and its conventions is that it slowly leads to the harmonisation of national laws, as states are obliged to integrate treaty provisions into their national legislation. And thus national legislation in some cases takes on the form of the convention. And my third point is that despite all the international conventions, we do not have an effective system to deal with the money, exactly. We've made progress. Maybe it's more difficult today to hide one's money, but we still have things like offshore accounts and no international conventions to deal with it. And where countries do not ratify the conventions, of course there are loopholes. So in the area of money laundering, what we do have internationally are the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force and the Regional Financial Action Task Force actions. We have the Convention Against Corruption and the other conventions I'd mentioned earlier. But we don't have an easy system for tracking and tracing the money. So for example, in our own national jurisdictions, you have to have the order of a judge to be able to then go to the banks to ask them to disclose the information and certain documents. And of course, these are the bank secrecy laws. Internationally, to do this, it's very difficult. So quickly, just to sum up the points, the first is we're too slow to adapt to new threats. Second, we have a system that exists and it's comprehensive but it's not used. And third, we have many loopholes, specifically in relation to tracking and tracing the money. So for the moment, I guess criminals may always stay a little bit ahead of us, but we must find a way to negotiate international conventions more quickly and more effectively. But in the meantime, what we can do is focus on the operational institutions and the opportunities that are available to us and utilise these so that international cooperation between all law enforcement is at its best and it works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosella. We really appreciate the points you raised are very important. And one of those, for instance, is the consideration we need to have regarding the different jurisdictions when some cases arise. Like in the case of our friends from China, from the Ministry of Public Security, they mentioned a case that connected 3 regions besides China, also Middle East and America. So it's something that we need to take into consideration. And I believe that your points will also be linked to the ones that will be raised now by Marco, our friend from UNICRI, Marco Musumeci. Please. There you have the...
Thank you, everyone. I'm here representing UNICRI. Just a couple of words before I start. We are a UN institute with a specific mandate on organized crime and criminal justice. That's exactly for this reason that since many years now, we developed a whole program dedicated to analyzing how organized crime is really managing the production and trade of counterfeit products. It's for this reason that we were excited and very happy, stimulated to join forces with BASCAP for the realization of this report that I will present today. Yes, I'm very happy that I'm the third speaker because many of these elements have already been presented by my colleagues, so I can really use 30 seconds for these slides and focus on the results of this report. But these are preliminary elements that I think convince both BASCAP and UNICRI on the importance of producing some research to justify why we need a shift in strategy in the fight against counterfeiting and piracy. So we have seen that it is a big business. We have seen that this organized crime who is profiting, who is managing this trade. And we have seen very clearly that this is one of the many forms and manifestations of transnational organized crime. So why a report that is focused on the application of the proceeds of crime legislation to counterfeiting and piracy? Well, first of all, we have to say that the goal of the report is exactly stimulating the discussion, stimulating governments to see how important are the effect of the seizure, the confiscation of the proceeds of crime to fight transnational organized crime, and how the global fight against counterfeiting and piracy could really benefit from the application of POC legislation to counterfeiting and piracy. Well, why? Because if we start to attack the money of criminals, if we start to identify, trace, freeze, confiscate the money of the organized crime, especially in cases of counterfeiting and piracy, we are adding an element of deterrence. We have seen that the profit versus risk ratio in the cases of counterfeiting is clearly in favor of the profits, because criminals can have a lot of money and they do not risk that much. So if we attack the money that is the profit of the crime, we are surely attacking one of the most important elements that is leading organized crime to conduct counterfeiting and piracy operation, that is exactly profit. So we are hitting criminals where it hurts the most, because we are depriving them of their profits. And we are also have the possibility of reinvesting the proceeds of crime into activities to support the expenses of the law enforcement activity. This has a potentially a very strong effect on organized crime. Why? Because we are also hitting them in their honor, let's say so. We know they have a very strong point in saying, wow, we are the ones who are controlling the territory. If we show them that we are the ones who are taking their profits, who are confiscating their assets, who are confiscating their warehouses, confiscating their lands, and we are the ones who are managing now this same property and reinvesting the same property in activity that is funding law enforcement, we are showing them that we are the ones who are in reality controlling the territory. The report is available at the BASCAP booth, so I will just touch the most important elements that we covered, and you can deal with it more into detail when you have the report in your hands. So it is very clear that we provided an example of specific elements that should be taken into account from those countries that want to implement a POC regime. Following the discussion where we explained why it is important to apply this regime to effectively fight against criminals involved in counterfeiting and piracy. So we need to have laws that provide for the identification, tracing, seizing, freezing, confiscation, and returning of proceeds of crime. We developed our model legislation and our discussion analyzing 4 countries at this stage. So we analyzed what is going on, which is the legislative framework in the UK, in Italy, in Switzerland, and in Australia. And thanks to this analysis, we came up with an inventory of key legislative provisions and best practices that can be divided into 3 main areas. The first area is what we have to do from the legal framework perspective. The second area is what we have to do from the institutional framework. And third, what we have to do regarding international cooperation that we heard already is a very important element. So this is a sum up of these model provisions that are contained in the report. They are divided for each area. So it is extremely important to provide also for non-conviction-based regimes. You will find in the report a distinction on conviction-based regime confiscation and non-conviction-based regimes. I will not bore you on all the technicalities, but providing for non-conviction-based regimes is extremely important if we want to more effectively attack the property that is the derivation of the crime. It's very important that in all the countries that we analyzed, this is associated with a reversal of the burden of proof. It's not the prosecutor that has to show that a property is the result of a criminal activity where there are a lot of hints, like a standard of life that is not really justified but by the means that you declare. But it's the other way around. It's the person that is accused that, provided that there are certain hints, has the obligation to show that the property is the result of a lawful activity. We also need to provide training and investigation powers to the authorities, because we know that financial investigations are extremely important, so the authorities need to have the power to do this kind of investigations, need to have the power to see and even to trace and freeze those assets into which criminal assets were converted, and also those assets that were transferred to third parties by big mafia boss. That is a common practice. For what concerns institutional measures, it's very important to rationalize how the different law enforcement agencies work together within the same country, because they work towards the same goals. In many occasions there are mandates that are very similar, or there are many different police forces that are involved, so that we need to rationalize how they cooperate and how they work together for this same goal. And training and cooperation are a fundamental element if we really want to rationalize this structure. And for what concerns international cooperation, and following what Rosella was also saying, we need to ensure that mutual legal assistance and cooperation are in place, especially if we deal with financial investigations, or if you deal with the importance of finding an asset that is in another country from the country in which we are holding a trial. Which is the way forward? This is my last slide, so I will be in time. For sure, this is a first step, and this is a first step, and we need to have, of course, more data, because it's a constant search for more evidence on what organized crime is really doing. There are a lot of data that are already there, but there's always room for improvement and for cooperation. I think with the Interpol friends, it would be very welcome if we could cooperate with them to extend this element. We also need to extend the number of countries in which we conducted this analysis. So as a starting point, 4 is a quite interesting number, but we have more than 194 member states. So we need to increase the number of countries in which we analyze. We need to support the implementation of the key provisions, so passing from the research into the action. This is something that we could do all together again with BASCAP and with Interpol. There are a series of activities UNICRIS is already running, like cooperation with the Department of State and the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, that can also benefit a future expansion of this work. The key is that we need to stop criminals from profiting from the crime. We need to stop criminals from profiting from counterfeiting and piracy, because they put health and safety of citizens at risk, they damage legitimate producers, they damage governments, and they should not let profit from this kind of activities. We need to take their money and reinvest in the global fight against transnational organized crime. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Marco. You said it's a first step, but it's a very strong first step. We congratulate this partnership between UNICRI and BASCAP, because it will provide a very good tool for all of us involved in tackling counterfeiting and piracy. So, of course, Interpol would be delighted to help you, and I'm sure that most of participants here will also be in a condition of provide you with support. International cooperation is the key. Okay? So now we move on to our next speaker. He is Mr. Basil Nevolia from the National Central Bureau of NCD Ukraine. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In my presentation, I would like to highlight the following aspects very briefly. Firstly, a few words about the system of IP protection in Ukraine, legislation in public and law enforcement authorities involved. Then I'm going to touch the practice and results of law enforcement activities in IP protection in Ukraine. And of course, I will talk about international cooperation of Ukrainian law enforcement in IP protections. In the beginning, there are some very general notes. The second largest territory in the European continent, in conjunction with geographical location, number of population, and quite developed infrastructure, Ukraine is an attractive market for manufacturing, distribution, and trafficking of the counterfeited goods. During more than 20 years since Ukraine exists and as independent country, there was created an, I believe, quite effective state system of intellectual property rights protection. The main elements of this system are the following: legal platform or legislation, infrastructure necessary for IPR protection, mechanisms of legal acts realization, close cooperation of law enforcement, supervision institution, and private sector as well. And also we are exerting international cooperation in IPR protection using different tools, such as Interpol, WCO, Europol, and others. Ukraine joined a number of international treaties or agreements, adopted a number of internal legal acts which regulate relations in the sphere of IPR protection. You can see the titles and names of these treaties or agreements and internal acts on the screen. The state system of intellectual property right protection includes the state bodies, public authorities who are responsible, or we may say are empowered to influence IPR environment. I mean to regulate and to supervise matters concerned with that, and thoroughly empowered to investigate cases on violations of IPR. So briefly, they are as following: State Department of Intellectual Property, Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine or our national police, State Customs Service of Ukraine, Security Service of Ukraine, State Tax Administration, State Border Administration, and some other authorities. Now some words about spreading of IP violations. Currently we may speak about number of most typical of IP rights widespread in Ukraine, which are listed on the screen. Next slide are illustrated the results, some statistics of the police efforts in the sphere of IP crime combating. Of course, the figures are not so attractive as presented yesterday by my colleagues from China, but this is reality of my country. So there is no doubt that international law enforcement cooperation is a key factor for a successful fight against transnational forms of organized crime, and IP protection are not some exception. Ukraine has developed in different facilities in this sphere. We using the Interpol, Europol, WCO, and other facilities. But in my presentation, I would like to draw your attention on our experiences, and we suppose successful experiences, in use of Interpol facilities while combating this transnational organized crime and including IPR protection. So as Roberto already mentioned in his opening speech before this panel, one of a striking example of cooperation via Interpol channels is the Black Poseidon operation. I would like to say some words about this international operation, which was organized by Interpol in May 2012 on the eve of European Football Championship Euro 2012 that, as you maybe remember, had place in two countries, Poland and Ukraine. This operation was as a result of the chain of several trainings, seminars, working and operational meetings. The participants of the operation were 5 countries: Ukraine, Turkey, Georgia, Moldova, and Belarus. And Interpol General Secretariat coordinated actions of the operation. In that period, during 1 month, Ukrainian police carried out investigation of more than 200 criminal cases based on intellectual property rights violation. You can see some figures on the screen. The total results of the operation are available in Interpol General Secretariat, and if you are interested in, please apply to my colleagues from the General Secretariat, and we can receive some information about the total result of these efforts. So, the most spread violations which were identified during the operation are violations of copyright on computer software Microsoft, ADAP, 1C, illegal use of very famous trademarks and trade names such as Adidas, Nike, Puma, Reebok, and others. During the operation, Ukrainian police has seized counterfeit goods and equipment for their production for about 2.2 million of United States dollars. Special attention, naturally, of law enforcement agencies of Ukraine during this time has been paid to the protection of intellectual property rights of UEFA, namely manufacturing of counterfeited UEFA products, illegal use of trademarks for goods and services of UEFA, and its commercial partners in the context of the European Football Championship 2012. During the operation, by customs authorities only, there were discovered 1.33 million items of goods which had illegal UEFA symbols. On the screen you may see some photos from mentioned illegal manufacturers' workshops and some samples of counterfeited goods. Next few slides are illustrated some results from different regions of the country. Oh, yeah. Green. I have to push green. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm ahead of my presentation. So, summarizing above said, I would like to express from myself. I suppose I will announce very well-known, very simple and supported by everybody opinion that international police, especially law enforcement community, have to continue strengthening cooperation in the sphere of IP crime combating. Important role in this scope belongs to international organizations such as Interpol, World Customs Organization, and others. Ukraine will strongly support initiatives such as, for example, Operation Black Poseidon, and open for further cooperation. I would like to emphasize that taking into account impressive results of Black Poseidon operation in 2012, it was taken decision to hold such operations this year as well. In this regard, last week, an operative meeting regarding Black Poseidon 2013 took place in Interpol General Secretariat in Lyon. Significant is that World Customs Organization will join this operation, and 2 new countries, European Union's members, namely Poland and Romania, agreed to participate in it. So I have few seconds, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Turkish government and involved national authorities, to the Interpol, World Customs Organization, and other institutions for hosting the 7th Global Congress on Combating Counterfeit and Piracy. Thank you very much. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you, Vasil. And don't feel ashamed, because 237 cases opened during Black Poseidon. It was a very good number, so we are sure that in the future there will be more opportunities for you to perform as good as that and even better. And of course, even that information will help UNICRI and BASCAP maybe to continue working in their project. So thank you very much. And now let's move on to our next speaker. He is Juan Pablo Sousa. He's a lieutenant from the National Police in Colombia. So thank you very much and welcome.
Okay, good afternoon. Let me express a special greeting to all participants, to our Turkish authorities who have received us very cordial, the organizers, and all the persons attending the 7th Global Congress Conference on Piracy. It's an honor for me to stand before you to share the experience from the National Police of Colombia in the fight against counterfeiting. It should be stressed that Colombia has made great efforts to ensure that intellectual property is respected. Crimes against the intellectual property in any form, either a false trademark, violation of copyright, or maybe the adulteration of liquor, have been faced in the Colombian state with the support of both public and private institutions with the strategies that have created alliance in the fight against the piracy and at a large scale through the agreement against the Colombian piracy. In this hard work, the National Police of Colombia has received a significant support from the law enforcement agencies, ranking from the Presidency of the Republic, the Commerce, Industry and Tourism Department, the Ministry of Culture, the Attorney General's Office, the National Customs Directorate, as well as those who exercise functions of coordination and control against these shores. It is also important to mention the contribution received from organizations such as the University Externado de Colombia, the Society of Authors and Composers of Colombia, the Regional Center for Book Development in Latin America, who have made significant and determined efforts to the achievement reached up to date. It is also valid to note that during the year 2012, the Colombian National Police has dismantled international criminal networks, faking different kinds of products that were subsequently sold to the public. I mean products such as cooking oils, liquors of different brands, clothing, painting, textbooking, among others. In coordination with the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol, different operational initiatives of high value and with great results have been developed. The Jupiter operation, we carried out the seizure of counterfeit merchandise valued approximately on $5 million and caught 163 persons who were part of a network of distribution and marketing of these merchandises. The Pangea operations, we carried out the seizure of 87,000 drugs units valued on $47,000 and the identification of 8 websites where these drugs were marketed online. The Maya operation, seizure of counterfeited merchandise valued approximately $600,000 and the capture of 91 persons who were responsibilized for falsifying liquor that we sold to the public. It is valid to mention the different modus operandi carried out by the criminal organization engaged in the counterfeiting, where it has been established, for example, that in the counterfeiting of trademarks and patents, there is a high technological level in the manufacture of cigarette packs and brands using industrial machines. In this regard, the criminals have been reached a high level of professionalism, testing the audacity of the experts of our institution, due to the proliferation of products in shopping centers and through internet orders, which, according to the investigation in process, have entered illegally in our country. Regarding the counterfeiting of liquors, we have found small cottage industries that use traditional infrastructure, stills, and all elements needed to this process, like counterfeiting labels, essence, chemicals, as well as used stamps, cover, and recycled materials to this purpose. In these cases, the marketing is done primarily in a public facilities, such as a bar and a nightclubs, and we have noticed an important increase on special dates, according to the region of the country. Finally, I intend to highlight that counterfeiting is a source that is constantly evolving with the aggravating circumstance that the transnational crime networks are using the media, and therefore it is necessary to have the committing on a different states and private agencies to achieve public policies and allow the struggle against counterfeiting and the piracy. I want to show you a video about an operation. In this video, we can see a special operation against the counterfeiting software, given that it's a specific modus operandi in Colombia. The people bought this software think that it's original. With counterfeiting, it's mode very similar to the original. Even the licenses, keys for the product are put on the packaging, creating confianza in the buyer.
Y cuando lo fui a instalar en el computador, no sirvió. El programa mismo pide una actualización y pide unas configuraciones, unas claves, y se aplicaron las que venían en el folleto y en el paquete que nos dieron, y a la semana murió.
Expertos en el tema de piratería informática aseguran que bandas como la de la Mona incurren en varios delitos.
Primero tiene que ver con la defraudación a los derechos patrimoniales de autor. El segundo, los supuestos de las marcas. Estaremos adicionalmente en presencia del delito de estafa.
Software y licencias que a simple vista parecen originales y que por esta época están a la orden del día en este sector, pues ya se acerca la jornada escolar.
One of these efforts, that's the cooperation that have in Colombia with the Microsoft enterprises to search this kind of process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. I would like to make two comments regarding the performance of our friends in Colombia. In the past, they have been very active, but lately they have been even more successful in their interventions because they are very well connected internally. We have mentioned that it's important to have a very good international cooperation, but still inside the countries it's important to put in place the right organization to keep them connected, because it's the only way to perform better. I know particularly the case of Colombia, that's the case, and it's very, very important. Also, the connection you have with the private sector, like in the case of Microsoft, that they have a special forensic laboratory that it really helps. That, as far as I remember in the last statistics, is diminishing very importantly the piracy of software. So that's a comment that I wanted to make. So, please, let's give the floor now to our final speaker. He is Mr. Mikhailo Tijanic, Chief of Department for IPR from the Ministry of Interior in Serbia.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to participate in this important event, as well as for the opportunity to exchange experience related to inclusive approach to addressing the transnational organized crime aspects of trafficking in illicit goods. First, I want to mention that in Serbia there is a special police unit for combating counterfeit and piracy, which also has a task to protect copyright and other related rights from infringement, which means that it protects the rights of industrial and intellectual property holders. For these offenses, a maximum of 5 years imprisonment is imposed, but if they include organized criminal groups and money laundering, the penalties are much more severe and can range from 2 up to 12 years imprisonment, and of course include the implementation of proper financial investigation in order to determine how much money has been gained and laundered into the real cash flows, with the goal of confiscating that money from the criminals. I'd also like to point out that in addition to this special police unit, there is a specialized department within the Public Prosecution Office in Belgrade, which is exclusively responsible for prosecuting criminal offenses related to high-tech crime, including all criminal acts in the field of counterfeiting and piracy, whenever the means or the method of execution include the use of computers or computers networks. Prevention in the form of establishing public awareness about intellectual property and why it is necessary to protect it is of great importance for a high degree of respect for intellectual property rights. An effective system of sanctions for the violation of these rights is also vital, as it has an impact on reducing piracy. The new amendments to the law of copyright and related rights provide for fines between 1,000 and 30,000 euros, while the law on special powers for effective protection of intellectual property rights provide for accelerated infringement proceedings in order to issue sentences as promptly as possible. In Serbia, there is a very good cooperation between the police, customs, the market inspectorate, health inspections, and the intellectual property office, which is the key in the fight against counterfeiting and piracy. During the year 2012, Serbian Customs Administration, in cooperation with the border police, conducted a number of joint operations and thus prevented selling counterfeit medicine and fake branded shoes and clothes on the market of Serbia and other countries in the region. The fake medicines circulate through the globalized drug trade, originating mainly from organized crime groups and the drug cartels, making the geographical scope and complexity of control of such operations even more complex. The internet and illicit online pharmacies have facilitated the entry of fake medicines and counterfeit drugs into the supply chain. According to the World Health Organization, at least 50% of medicines purchased over the internet from illegal sites that conceal their physical address have been found to be counterfeit. According to the World Health Organization's estimates, at least 10% of the world's drug supply is thought to be counterfeit, creating tens of millions of euros in illicit profits and threatening public health and safety. The internet is a convenient place for selling counterfeit goods smuggled across the border or falsely declared as original, this legally entering the Serbian market. Such goods, whether it is drugs, consumer goods, clothing, or other, is significantly sold through various auction sites and social networks such as Facebook, where potential buyers are misled into believing that the goods is original. The goods are mostly imported from China and Hong Kong, but not as branded, that is not declared as specific brand. These are subsequently labeled as branded, which means that these items are labeled after the import with labels of particular brands, that is done in warehouses leased by Chinese nationals living in Serbia. Such places are very difficult to detect as they are closed systems which are extremely hard to penetrate, disrupt, and dismantle. The goods are then sold in flea markets and on the internet. In order to conceal these illegal activities, a number of post service are used and people hired for dispatching and receiving money. I think this model of distribution of counterfeit goods is present in other countries as well, and that special investigation measures are needed, such as cover surveillance, tapping, hiring undercover investigators and other, in order to break such sales chains. Last month, in several separate operations, the police unit for IPR protection seized over 5,000 pairs of fake sneakers of the brands Nike, Adidas, and Puma, which were sold on the internet through websites and social networks. On the basis of expertise results, the confiscated goods do not meet the standards by any criteria, so with absolute certainty it is counterfeit. In compliance with the previously taken international commitments, signed and ratified conventions in the field of copyright and other related rights, bilateral or multilateral trade agreements that are mainly related to the protection of domestic market against the trade of forged and counterfeit goods. The main goal is to provide a secure market environment for foreign investment, because no foreign company will invest in a country in which intellectual property rights are not protected. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mikhailo. It's very good to hear all the initiatives you are taking there, and particularly what you mentioned about the new laws that are more severe in your country. So that's a very good way to improve what you're doing in Serbia. I would like now to open the floor for questions, please. I would like, please, the microphones. We will try to get profit of the few times that we have left. Please say your name and who you represent. And be very concise with your question, please. Thank you.
My name is Marco De Andres. I work for Italy's customs agency, but I taking the floor as a simple citizen of a democratic country of the European Union, and I have a plea for my fellow citizen, Musumeci, not to use, the next time he does the same presentation, the term reversal of the burden of proof. I don't like it, and I think it's, rather irksome, because, the presumption of innocence is what a rule-based society is, what freedom is all about. I strongly urge you to use a different turn of words. You may say, for example, inviting suspects to explain the source of their wealth, of anything else, but please do not use the reversal of the burden of proof. It really, really is an awful term for, any society which is based on the rule of law, which is ultimately the essence of freedom and democracy. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Right. Well, I'm very sorry, but this commonly accepted definition and commonly accepted terminology. We find in every treaty, especially if you consider that the reversal of the burden of proof, you're not really doing it in an action against the person, unless you are in the scheme of the criminal confiscation. If you are dealing with the non-conviction-based confiscation, the action is an action in rem, is against the property. But the term, I'm sorry, I understand that, and there is a huge debate regarding finding a balance, especially for what concerns non-conviction-based confiscation. But the European Court of Justice says that between the balance of the right to property and the balance of fighting organized crime, it is more important to fight organized crime. So your position was reflecting in a lot of cases that went to the European Court of Human Rights. But unfortunately, this position did not win. So we are entitled to use the reversal of the burden of proof, because it is accepted terminology, commonly accepted terminology, that is used, and I will continue to use it, unless it will not be commonly accepted terminology. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
it's our choice, yes.
Sorry, we cannot hear you. Sorry, gentlemen, sorry, we cannot hear you, but I invite you, please, afterwards to continue the discussion, because this is our intention. Please, let's move on to the next question. The gentleman there, please. Thank you. Yes, there's another one there.
Abdurrahim Abul Qasim, Sudan Customs, head of or director of risk management. As you know, combating counterfeit and piracy is very difficult and hard. But because it is a transnational, well-organized crimes, joint efforts are needed, and now we are in the 7th Global Congress, and we are working hard, but the figures and statistics confirm the tremendous increase of these crimes. Are there, this is for the Interpol, are there any strategic plans and very effective plans for coordinating and cooperating with the relevant authorities, especially in the developing countries? Because really we are facing some kinds of smuggling, and we have no any intelligence and information to control these activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative from Sudan. I would like, where's the next question? Please raise your hand for the microphone to reach you. In the meantime, I answer you or I make you a comment. We as Interpol, we are very happy to work also with Sudan. 2 weeks ago, we had a training in Marrakesh, and Sudan was part of the audience. We had a representative from police and customs, so we are following your comment and your advice, so thank you very much for that. Please, next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Miroslav. I'm working for the Procter & Gamble company, so representing the private sector. First of all, I wish to thank you all for the efforts and the great job that you're doing, Interpol and all of the national ministries and different law enforcement agencies. We as a private sector understand that the collaboration between us and you is also crucial. And I just wanted to ask Mrs. Rossella, because she has made 1 point out of 3 that she made, that there are comprehensive systems in place which are not fully utilized or utilized to their full potential. If she could kindly explain us how can we be better, how can we cooperate better and provide you with a better service from the private sector point of view, and at the same time have it all legal and in the legal framework and the international cooperation. And just one suggestion, myself and many other colleagues representing different companies, right holders, we usually manage more than one country, so to say. So we are in charge of certain region, and sometimes it is very much possible that you can use us, so to say, as a resource in cooperation between different countries as well. Thank you.
While we wait for the other question, I would like to make a comment and thank you. And I would like, on behalf of Interpol, I would like to express our gratitude to Customs. WCO is always working with us. They always accept our invitation when we have trainings or operations. And I believe this is also part of the success that we have, not only working with agencies, with law enforcement officials, but also with the support of private sector. I believe the successes that we have heard from Serbia, from Colombia, from Ukraine, and also from our friends from China, it's part of what we are witnessing at the moment. We are being stronger, maybe better. I do believe that we are doing a good job. We can improve, of course, but thanks to this partnership between agencies and private sector, we are achieving better results. Who's the next one? Please, Michael. Can we? Yes.
Sorry. I think that question was directed at me, and I just want to provide a very quick answer. When I made that point about the system not being utilised to its full potential, I was thinking of more the institutional frameworks and the institutions that exist within them. So the law enforcement bodies, the transfer of investigative information across borders, how that's used for prosecution, and how that ties into, for example, mutual legal assistance and extradition provisions within treaties and things like this. So it's a bit different. In relation to the private sector, and saying that we can make a difference while we wait for the institutional process to develop and quicken and become more efficient, I think there are ways we could do that together through partnerships, through policy development, because I know that's important, and through focusing on key topics. So things like what BASCAP is doing and UNICRI as well, producing the papers on confiscation of proceeds, free trade zones perhaps, other big issues, the internet sales. And if we start to develop the ideas cooperatively together with private sectors and with the government, we have a better chance, I think. And now we have the opportunity to do that.
Yes, thank you.
Please.
Yes. Okay. My name is Michael Kwan from the Hong Kong Customs. I want to make some remarks on the speaker of Serbia mentioned about the online platform. Actually, it is a big problem because of the internet sales that cause the transshipment problem. Now, actually in Hong Kong, we have a couple of the online platforms that are selling, well, the counterfeit handbags, sportswear, those kinds of things. But most of the owners, those sellers that are actually located outside Hong Kong. So that's the problem. We always ask, we always welcome other countries to give us the information if what they say is the goods are coming from Hong Kong that are or sourced from the online platforms. We do welcome the intelligence exchange. Okay, that's the remark that I want to make.
Thank you. Somebody want to? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have another question? There, please.
Roberto, thank you. My name is Ewan Duncan. I represent British American Tobacco. And my question is for Mr. Navolia from Ukraine. Thank you very much. You give a great example of cooperation between law enforcement and the private sector in dealing with counterfeiters on a huge scale. Your example was Black Poseidon. The tobacco industry, all four big tobacco companies, and actually even others who are involved in the illicit trade in tobacco products, have their products counterfeited in Ukraine on an industrial scale. This takes an awful lot of money, millions of dollars every year, away from the Ukrainian government. Do you think, therefore, by cooperating with us, who have a lot of information to share with law enforcement in Ukraine, we could do a Black Poseidon against counterfeit tobacco production? We could tell you where it is done, for example.
Oh, thank you very much for your question. So generally answering, I have to say yes, we are ready to cooperate with the private sector, but as I was trying to explain in my presentation, there is I believe there's very good legislation system exists in my country right now, but the problem is in this realization into practice. Because even starting from the mentality of our law enforcement personnel, it is still some problematic issues. For example, not for example, but this is the issues for our country, and we need to train more effective our personnel, our law enforcement personnel, to turn them towards the problematic of IPR protection. But I think this is a matter of the time, and by common efforts we will solve all this still existing problem in our cooperation. So if I answer your questions, thank you very much.
you partly answered the question, if I may say so. Could you just say that you'd be willing to work with us on sharing information, us to you, for you to do something about this counterfeit production, which is huge?
Can you repeat, please? We do not have a good audio.
Okay. My question really is, the tobacco industry, and not just my company, has a lot of information from investigations in Ukraine. Counterfeit tobacco production is widespread. It makes millions of dollars every year for criminals, takes it away from the Ukrainian state. Can you work with us to use that information, to exploit it in the way that you did successfully with Operation Black Poseidon, and do something about the counterfeit production in Ukraine?
So still the level of voice was not enough, but it seems to me I understood your questions. But I cannot to reply on behalf of all Ukrainian government, you know. But I think Ukraine on the way to realize all the necessary efforts in order to elaborate this problem together with all the international institutions and organizations. And if your question is, are we ready to cooperate and are we ready to solve this problem? My answer is yes, we are ready. If you have some personal contacts, if you need some personal contacts, I think at the moment I am a right person. Please contact with me and we will try to solve and to arrange all your further contacts in this context. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excuse me.
1 minute, please.
Okay. I would like to say something, and will speak in Chinese, and I would ask my colleague, Mr. Gen Jinxin, to translate. 刚才那个我们有发言的同事在提到了，就是有一些假冒伪劣的产品来自于中国。我想我在我的讲话中也提到过，现在这个制假贩假呢，已经是一个国际化的一个链条，形成了一个链条化。那么这跨国的这个知识产权犯罪对各国的这个危害都很大，无论是这个假冒伪劣产品的生产国、转运国，还有消费国。 都是在这个链条上是重要的一环，我们都应该合作去打击。
Okay, Mr. Zhang is come from China, is in charge of IP, and now is a deputy division chief in China ECID. So I'm from Interpol. So it means it's protection of intellectual property rights and the cracking down on counterfeiting crimes is very important and ongoing issue to the Chinese government and the policymakers. But now, so we need to find the source, the criminal root source, and to destroy the whole chains of the transnational organized crimes. So this is what we want to say is our goal should be to effectively reduce the supply and demand so as to interrupt and completely destroy the chance of producing, delivering, and selling sectors. And China is willing to cooperate with any international organizations and law enforcement agencies, especially for Interpol, and so for the building of mutual trust and the proper law enforcement mechanisms that should be enacted in the field to effectively combat the transnational organized crime of counterfeiting and piracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an important remark at the end of our panel. I would like to summarize some things that we said this afternoon. You started very well saying that it's important to destroy the whole chain of this type of crimes. Rosella also mentioned how important it is to consider the different jurisdictions to tackle this problem and the emerging threats, how to negotiate international conventions, the importance of that. Also in the case of UNICRI, we heard the new development that you are doing together with the private sector. Our friends from Ukraine, Colombia, and Serbia, they explained the success that they've been having working in partnership with other countries, but also inside their own territory. So that's it has been, I believe, a very profitable panel. We have covered very important items. There was a good discussion and interaction. So I would like to thank our speakers, please. And also to all of you for your participation, for your questions, and also to the interpreters for making us understand. And of course, I would like you to invite you to continue the discussions with our panelists during this afternoon, maybe, or tomorrow during the coffee breaks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this was the final session of day 2, Transnational Organized Crime in relation to Counterfeiting and Piracy. We thank our moderator and speakers once again. We thank you so much too. So this was the final session for today, and tomorrow I'd like to remind you all that the event will start off tomorrow morning at 9 again. And one more reminder is about the headsets. Please return the headsets on its desk. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.